Welcome, first of all. Thank you so much for coming this evening. Let me start with an apology. I know some of you have spent quite a while queuing outside. I'm so sorry that's happened. We've been absolutely overwhelmed with the demand and interest in this event. My name's Mark Williamson. I'm Director of Action for Happiness. I'm just going to, in a moment, introduce Lord Layard, one of the founders of Action for Happiness, who will then in turn introduce our speaker this evening. But I wanted to just start with a very brief introduction to Action for Happiness, what it is we are trying to do. Many of you here, I think, may have been at our launch event earlier in the year, but I wanted to just share with you some of what we've been up to and some of our plans. This is actually the first of a number of events like this we're hoping to put on in London and indeed across the country and more broadly. So we'd love to have you involved in more of those as well. We launched, as I said, back in April, and we've been delighted with the response. We've had something like 17,000 people now join this movement that we're trying to create. And this is basically people from a very wide range of walks of life who are all passionate about the fact that we would like to see a happier society, and that's not only about changing perhaps some aspects of our culture at the system level, it's also about how we behave as individuals. It's about how we are in our families, in our communities, in our workplaces. So it's been inspiring and wonderful to hear all the stories of things people are doing that are linked in some way to this movement. I wanted to share with you three specific things that we're going to be focusing on over the coming months, which we think are all really important in this move towards a happier society, a society that prioritises the things that matter most. First of all, in terms of local action groups, we've been, again, really pleased to see so many people wanting to take action to help improve well-being of those around them in their local communities. We've seen groups popping up all over the country. At the moment, we're working on a project to try and develop some new materials and ideas to support these local groups. So if you are somebody who's interested in taking some of the ideas that we've got in the movement and that draws on all this wonderful science and knowledge we have, some of which Matthieu will talk about this evening, then please do get in contact with us. We're going to be trying to support people in turning these big ideas into practical local action, and we'd love to have you involved in that. So that's one item. Secondly, in schools, we're partnering with the National Children's Bureau to try and get a greater focus on well-being and happiness in the school system. A school system that's increasingly focused on exam performance as the only measure of success, and yet we believe that education is fundamentally about equipping children with the skills they need to flourish in life, and that's much broader than just passing exams. So we're working with some of the leading schools that are passionate about this area to try and find ways of supporting and bringing in new knowledge to support schools that really care deeply about well-being being at the heart of their objectives as a school. There's more information about all these things on our website. But it's not just in terms of individual action and some of the wonderful things that people are doing. We're part of an amazing momentum that's happening internationally, and I just wanted to mention sort of some of the political and wider changes that are going on. So in the UK, we have, I'm sure all of you are aware that the government is now moving to measure well-being in a more active way. The gentleman here behind the Prime Minister is Sir Gus O'Donnell, the head of the Civil Service, and what's been really encouraging recently is he has been talking about policymakers in government, across government, starting to use these measures of well-being, subjective measures of how we feel about our lives in the policy-making process. And we think that's absolutely essential to make better decisions in government. We've also seen interest at the OECD level, an organisation that's been traditionally focused on economic measures as the main focus, now moving to look at their Better a Life initiative, broader measures of success. And I think perhaps most excitingly of all, at the United Nations, just recently, led by the Prime Minister of Bhutan, with many others, there's been a motion passed at the United Nations that encourages countries to put a greater focus on happiness. So all of this is linking together in personal action, in community action, but also in wider change, not just in the UK, but internationally. And I think that's really exciting. But of course, we also have a lot of people who challenge this agenda and don't believe it's important. This is something that came out, you may have seen, or potentially not seen, depending on your reading habits. A coverage in the Daily Mail this week. Janet Street-Porter wrote an article. She'd been trying out some of our actions for happiness, our 10 keys to happier living. Her quote here I've chosen, "I like to think that negativity and pessimism are unique British traits which should be celebrated, not frowned upon." I mean, it was a funny article, but basically, I think highlighted a real challenge we have with this agenda, and there's a desire to shoot it down as a cynical reaction to what is ultimately a really profound and important shift that we're trying to create here. So we're going to get some of that, but we also have an increasing range of very positive support. So this is a similar attempt by a journalist to look at some of these actions for happiness in The Guardian just the week before, last week. And Hannah Booth here wrote a very charming piece, having tried these things out personally. And again, a quote here: "I came away glowing with something indefinable, the sensation that I've done something really nice," commenting there on acts of kindness that she'd been doing, and I think talking to her sister-in-law in this case about how much she meant to her. So there are some very positive and also less positive reactions to this, but as members of this movement and people who believe passionately in this, I would encourage all of us to keep talking about why this really matters. Just finally, this is the first, as I said, of a series of events like this we're trying to put on. So just to draw your attention to the fact that in October we're planning to screen this film Happy. It's a documentary that looks at the question of what is it that makes us happy, right across the world, from African communities to developed countries to a whole range of different people in different walks of life. A very inspiring film, so if you're interested in coming to watch that, then please join us next month. But we're also trying to get this film shown right across the country. So again, if you know of people who would like to put on local screenings of this film, then again, please do get in touch. Beyond that, in November, we're delighted that Henry Stewart, a real passionate advocate of happiness in the workplace, is going to be talking to us about his knowledge and experience of creating genuinely happier workplaces. So I'd certainly recommend that one. And we're also hoping to show another film, I Am, which is all about how interconnected we are all, in December. So again, something to watch out for, and we'll be confirming the date shortly. So that's a very quick taste of what we've been doing and indeed of what's coming up. And if you've got any questions about Action for Happiness, please do grab me or indeed any of the rest of the team who've been helping out this evening. And thank you so much to all of the volunteers, both this evening and indeed in general. Wonderful support we've had. I'd now like to introduce the founder of Action for Happiness, co-founder along with two others, but in many ways his book, Happiness, was the genesis of where this came from. Back in 2005, it led to a big shift in the way that we think about what we really value most in a society. Lord Richard Layard, I'd like to welcome to the stage, who will then introduce our speaker this evening. So please join me in welcoming Richard Layard.
Well, it's absolutely wonderful to have Matthieu here to open this series of events. I was really thrilled. He happened to be here at the right time, in the right place. I've learnt so much from Matthieu, and I'm sure there are many people here who have already learnt from his lovely books on happiness, on meditation, and other subjects. But the most interesting thing about Matthieu is he's not only a monk, he's also a scientist. In fact, he started as a scientist, and at the age of 30, he was one of the leading molecular biologists in Paris of that age group. But he decided to go to Nepal and become a monk. And that has been his home ever since. And he has made a huge impact there, not only spiritually, but also materially. He actually runs 110 projects, most of them helping the Tibetan people who, as you know, are struggling with schools, hospitals, women's services, and so on. But also, and after a period of being really pretty much cut off from the West, in the last 20 years, he's been involved in a really interesting activity, which I'm sure he'll tell you about, which is bringing the East and the West together. This is an organization called Mind and Life Institute, and its aim is to examine to what extent the psychology in Buddhist teaching is confirmed by modern Western psychology and modern neuroscience. And this, of course, is a really interesting exploration, because if there's a truth, we want to be able to show it. We don't just want to preach, we also want to be able to prove. And the investigations that we made have included putting Matthieu into an MRI scanner, and I don't like to embarrass him. But I can tell you, I think this is still true, that his happiness reading in the MRI scanner is the greatest that has ever been observed. Anyway, this may be why when the Northern Line is particularly packed and uncomfortable, I find the most calming thing is to meditate on Matthieu. So, Matthieu, thank you so much for coming, and tell us the secret.